And as much as we really are folks focusing on the positive aspects of our country, what a privilege it is to be an American, how great a country it is. At the same time, I would like to hear perhaps just a touch more about the farmers that Willie's singing for on Friday, about the American Indian and how they feel, whether they're living in liberty or not, and the homeless and the poverty-stricken here in our country. We have a lot of problems yet to deal with. We have the greatest opportunity in the world to face those problems and to deal with them, and we should remember that also.
On October 12, 1997, a glass-smooth Pacific Ocean reflected John Denver's experimental aircraft just long enough to watch it plunge nose first into the water, killing him, the only passenger and pilot, instantly. Fishermen heard a hollow pop, then silence. No mayday, no flare, just debris twirling like confetti. Rescuers pulled up a foam headrest and a scrap of wing. The cockpit harness was unbuckled, suggesting Denver twisted for something he couldn't reach in time. The toxicology reports later came back spotless. 0 drugs, 0 booze. It didn't matter though. Morning papers reran his 1994 DUI mugshot and screamed, "Drunk flying crooner crashes." The contradiction was a delicious clickbait. The truth was a footnote. How does a man with 2 drunk driving cases end up stone cold sober, yet dead in an airplane he barely knew? Investigators hinted that the answer lay not in his veins, but in a bolt hidden behind his seat. Rewind to Roswell, New Mexico, December 31st, 1943. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. arrived at the Army airfield under the roar of test pilot jets and a military cadence. A hand-me-down guitar from his grandmother set him spinning musical galaxies. He practiced until his fingers bled. In music, he found altitude without engines, charting melodies like constellations. Rumor has it he could pick out a C major chord as easily as Dad could spot a MiG plane overhead. By 19, he decamped to Los Angeles. Legend says he hitchhiked in a beat-up Chevy, guitar slung over his shoulder, and a name no marquee could handle. He told club owners, "Call me Denver," after the mountain skyline he'd only known from postcards. That one-word rebrand killed harder than any demo tape. He was building his own myth even as he chased it, and proved that you can sometimes pick your landscape before it picks you. Rocky Mountain High hit the airwaves in October 1972, celebrating starlit peaks and thin air so vividly that some stations yanked it, fearing an FCC crackdown on drug songs. Denver shrugged, clarifying the only real high he meant was the altitude, then watched the tune soar into the top 10. 2 years later, he penned Calypso in tribute to Jacques Cousteau's famed ship, donating every penny of royalties to the Cousteau Society. By 1976, Denver wasn't just chasing hits, he was signing them. Out of a snowmass retreat, he launched Windsong Records as a home for folk and roots artists. The very first act on his roster was a husband and wife duo turned quartet called the Starland Vocal Band. Their cheeky anthem, Afternoon Delight, shot up the charts, snagging the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 the week of July 31st, 1976. When the Grammys rolled around in 1977, Windsong walked away with 2 trophies, Best New Artist and Best Arrangement for Voices, proving Denver had an ear not just for his own songs, but for the next big thing. Forget demo tapes, this was brand magic on full throttle. While Rocky Mountain High climbed the charts, Denver was scaling global hunger too. In 1977, he co-founded the Hunger Project, a grassroots drive to end chronic starvation. When President Jimmy Carter formed the Presidential Commission on World and Domestic Hunger in September 1978, he tapped Denver as one of its 14 members charged with crafting real solutions. Denver then joined Hunger Projects, the UNICEF fact-finding delegations, touring drought-stricken African nations, and even earned the Presidential World Without Hunger Award for his tireless advocacy. It turned out that his biggest hit was feeding the world. With a Grammy, over 33 million albums, The Muppet Show appearances, Denver's career cruised at jet speed. He even lobbied NASA to be the first musician in space, a dream that died with the Challenger explosion. He filled the void with hang gliders, sailplanes, anything that got him above the cloud line. He didn't just lobby NASA, he became its most unlikely medal recipient. In 1985, Denver received the NASA Exceptional Public Service Medal, normally reserved for engineers and scientists, for helping to increase awareness of space exploration by the peoples of the world. He had also helped craft the Citizens in Space program, passed NASA's rigorous physical and mental exams, and emerged as a leading candidate for the first civilian shuttle flight, only to see the Challenger ground those dreams forever. This is proof that sometimes a folk singer can outshine a test pilot even in 0G. Success looks serene from the ground, but at 10,000 feet, he kept chasing a horizon that always inched away. Between tour dates, he earned his commercial pilot certificate, amassing about 2,700 flight hours, including instrument time in twin-engine planes, which is more cockpit time than many regional airline newcomers. To Denver, charts and chords shared the same DNA. For him, they were both maps through thin air. He wrote Annie's song in 10 minutes on a ski lift, immortalizing his wife Annie Martell as folk's ultimate muse. But behind those chalet doors, the romance frayed, with endless tours, empty hotel rooms, whispers of groupie jealousy. In a 1983 Country Boy documentary interview, Denver admitted career demands and his passion for flying repeatedly yanked him from home, sometimes putting the sky before Annie. As time passed, the gulf grew wider than any canyon he'd ever serenaded. By 1982, the split turned ugly. Denver himself admitted in his autobiography that upon discovering Annie had cut down trees on their property, he got the power saw going, severing their marital bed and allegedly the kitchen table in half. No criminal charges followed, and Annie never pressed them, but headlines exploded, shredding his Boy Scout halo overnight. Fans who once hummed Sunshine suddenly wondered what storms brewed behind that effortless grin. In December 1984, Denver traveled to the USSR at the invitation of the Soviet Union of Composers, becoming the first major American artist on Soviet stages since Elton John's 1979 tour. He played embassy salons for diplomats, factory floor concerts for workers, and evening shows at Moscow's Trade Center. Locals were enchanted by his green message amid gray cityscapes. A few years later, he even crossed the Iron Curtain in the studio, teaming with Russian rock legend Alexander Gradsky in 1986 to record Let Us Begin, What Are We Making Weapons For?, one of the first US-Soviet musical collaborations. It wasn't just Cold War choreography, it was a cultural thought in melody and message. In September 1985, he showed up at the Tipper Gorse PMRC hearings, decrying lyric censorship with preacher-level conviction. Senators had braced for a mellow crooner. They got a libertarian firebrand quoting the First Amendment. His testimony drew as much attention as Dee Snider's Leather Rebellion and Frank Zappa's razor-sharp wit. The subtext was that Denver's moral compass spun it on its own bearings. Around the same time, he penned open letters and gave media interviews opposing oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, ruffling industry feathers. Rumor mills whispered about his daredevil flying and radical activism, a sticky smear that clung to his eco-icon image like pine sap, another wrinkle in his high-altitude reputation. His second marriage to Australian actress Cassandra Delaney felt like a B-side destined to skip. They separated in 1991, locked in bitter custody and property disputes over their daughter Jessie Bell. Denver channeled heartbreak into cockpit hours, logging long solo flights. His friends noticed a pattern. Turbulence in love means turbulence in the logbook, both converging on that fatal Monterey climb the world still tries to chart. The divorce filings awarded primary custody of Jessie Bell to Cassandra and granted Denver joint custody, and left his fleet of aircraft firmly under his control. On August 21, 1994 in Aspen, Denver's 1963 Porsche kissed a tree outside his home, which was a rude wake-up call for the man whose voice sold over 33 million records. His breathalyzer read .14, which is well past Colorado's .10 limit. He pleaded guilty to a DUI, drew probation, and was ordered to perform a benefit concert as part of his 28 hours of community service. His fans prayed for sobriety, but his bottle kept humming back up. There was no second smash. Instead, the real collision came with Denver's pilot license. In October 1995, the FAA warned him to stay sober if he wanted to fly, and by 1996, they'd revoked his medical certificate when he failed to comply. He then entered rehab, filed appeals, and fought bureaucracy, but those appeals never cleared the runway. His 2 DUIs convinced the FAA to yank his medical certificate. Legally, Denver couldn't pilot even a lawnmower with wings. He pledged for rehab, sent apologetic faxes to Air Rally buddies, and filed appeal papers thicker than a greatest hits album. The sky was once his refuge has become a velvet rope he wasn't on the list for. When the FAA yanked his medical license in 1996, Denver didn't just lose a license, he lost half of his soul. The singer who'd serenaded horizons suddenly found himself grounded in more ways than one, trading throttle for therapy and songwriting sessions for sobriety check-ins. Grounded, he chased adrenaline elsewhere. He took to sail planes and gliders whenever the ground felt too confining. Altitude was oxygen to his identity, and the cravings never detoxed. His friends joked that his grin grew with every foot he climbed. Earth to Denver felt like a dress rehearsal. On September 27, 1997, he purchased a Rutan Long Easy, a sleek canard kit plane built like a paper dart. It was stylish, but the fuel selector valve had been moved behind the left shoulder, forcing pilots into a literal twist to switch tanks. He'd flown it only about 30 minutes. The investigators later found a handwritten warning in the hangar. Fuel selector awkward. Practice reach on the ground. It was one neglected note and one flawed reach. Sometimes that's all it takes. He lifted off from Monterey Peninsula Airport at about 5:12 p.m., ignoring the fact he no longer had a pilot's license. He climbed the sky as smooth as silk, and then everything went quiet. After 3 routine touch-and-goes, witnesses reported a single engine pop and watched the Long Easy bank leave before plummeting into Monterey Bay. Tower tapes end with an unanswered call to N555JD, his airplane code. Rescue vessels arrived within minutes, only to find a widening slick of algae twisting in the surf. Within minutes, the Coast Guard crews were on scene, recovering fragments of the Long Easy and Denver's remains. Formal ID waited until fingerprints arrived from Aspen the next day. With no cockpit recorder on board, the NTSB pieced together the finale from wreckage. The awkwardly placed fuel selector valve forced Denver to twist, and in doing so, he applied rudder, yawing and rolling the plane at just a few hundred feet. There was no time to pull out of that dive, and he entered a lethal nosedive. The press dredged up DUI mugshots in bold headlines, yet the toxicology confirmed he was stone-cold sober. Aviation circles hashed out whether pilot error on the kit's plane quirks bore the blame, but most agreed this was a tragedy, not intent. Meanwhile, Denver's estate tangled with the IRS. Officials argued his $19 million portfolio had been undervalued by $2.5 million, slapping the heirs with a $1.5 million back tax claim that took years to resolve. Even in death, the fine print flies first class. But there's more than cold findings here. Even the president weighed in. Bill Clinton summed it up best. His soaring music evoked the grandeur of our landscape and the simple warmth of human love. He was a dedicated champion of the environment. That quote cuts through the dry facts, reminding us that above everything, we lost a voice that lifted us higher. There's a bittersweet irony to the story. John's dad, Lieutenant Colonel Dutch Deutschendorf, flew a Mach 2 Convair B-58 Hustler and snagged 6 FAI speed records in 1961. A master pilot with a flawless career. His son John perished wrestling a fuel lever at 500 feet. They both chased flight like a hymn, yet only one landed every time. His fans now gather each October on Monterey shore to toss sunflowers into the surf, watching them drift and wondering if John Denver's final note was penned by his own hand or by an airplane that demanded a contortionist, not a pilot. With his toxicology being spotless, the rumor mill shifted gears. Some allege a mechanic tweaked the fuel line, and others whisper vandals siphoned gas after a hangar spat. Fringe talk show callers even claimed big oil hitmen lurked in the shadows, but none of it substantiated. Conspiracy forums point to a missing pre-flight log page, but NTSB records make no mention of it. The story is one blank sheet, and it has enough oxygen for theories to climb to cruising altitude. After Denver's death in 1997, the Windstar Foundation struggled without its founder's charisma or checkbook. Donations dwindled, and in 2012, the board voted to dissolve the foundation, transferring its 957-acre preserve to the Windstar Land Conservancy and its remaining assets to the John Denver Aspen Glow Fund of the Aspen Community Foundation. In the years since, Aspen Glow has granted over $4 million to nonprofit causes, funding everything from school solar panels to wildlife conservation and keeping Denver's environmental vision alive. After his death, Denver's archives yielded a trove of demos and alternate takes. In September 1998, the RCA released Forever John, a collection of 12 previously unreleased tracks recorded between 1969 and 1980. Later, the 2014 box set All of My Memories expanded that trove to 90 songs, demos, live cuts, and 6 more unreleased gems, delivering the lost verses fans never knew they craved. The NTSB's 1998 findings didn't stop at just assuming pilot error. They pressed for real change. Their report urged the FAA and Experimental Aircraft Association to mandate clear, accessible labeling and placement of fuel selector valves on amateur-built plane, and to require formal transition training for pilots moving into unfamiliar designs. In 2007, Pacific Grove unveiled a bronze plaque on the Monterey shore, a guitar etched against the waves, inscribed with lines from Denver's Wind Song. Visitors leave sunflowers at its foot, and legend says, if the late day breeze hits just right, you can almost hear "Leaving on a Jet Plane" whispered through the cypress. "Take Me Home, Country Roads" was enshrined as one of West Virginia's official state songs on March 7, 2014. College stadiums still roar it like a regional hymn. On streaming platforms, legend endures. Over 660 million Spotify streams and 543 million YouTube plays attest that Denver's voice still finds new ears in every algorithm. The man who chased thin air continues soaring through every road trip playlist. On April 21, 2011, on Earth Day Eve, Denver achieved a new kind of liftoff as the inaugural inductee of the Colorado Music Hall of Fame at Broomfield's First Bank Center. Hosted by Olivia Newton-John, the sold-out gala saw the nitty-gritty dirt band Lee Ann Womack, John Oates, Bill Danoff, and John Summers take the stage while Lee Holdridge and the Boulder Philharmonic wove Denver's melodies into orchestral gold. Fans also financed Spirit, a towering bronze sculpture by Sue DeSico, now standing sentinel at Red Rocks Amphitheater, an echo of a man whose spirit forever aimed skyward. On October 24, 2014, John Denver got his posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, star number 2531, right by the Chinese Theater. Family and fans watched as sunflowers and settlers fluttered in LA breeze, still chasing that perfect spotlight. So we're left with a cockpit that hit its critical switch just out of reach, a fuel tank left empty, and an NTSB report that rewrote safety rules in his absence. Did John Denver die chasing altitude recklessly, or did a design flaw pull him from the sky? Scroll down, choose your runway. Pilot error, corporate oversight, or fate tightening a loose bolt. And when Rocky Mountain High climbs on your playlist, remember, sometimes the view from 500 feet costs more than any ticket home. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.